My name's Arina Van Breda, and I'm the Director for Voter Registration for the League of Women Voters of the Fairfax area, which incorporates Fairfax County and the city of Fairfax. And so therefore it includes a lot of George Mason students at the Fairfax campus.
Yeah. And what has the League of Women Voters been doing on campus to prep for the election?
Well, we have been really excited to be part of a university-wide outreach that includes your university staff, the administration, some of the faculty, particularly Dr. Jen Victor, who runs the Democracy Lab for freshman students, Mason Votes, and a whole lot of different components. And the League of Women Voters is kind of an outside consultant to help with some of the logistical and technical aspects of getting students registered. So we have been, we started planning in July, and we've been active since the first day students were back on campus, coming multiple times to help students register to vote, to explain to them what the process is for voting as a student in Virginia, whether they're Virginians or whether they are coming from out of state. And we have done a number of get out the vote activities, but it's been heavily geared towards getting students to register, in particular before the deadline this year was October 15th, to try to avoid students thinking, oh, I'm going to run in and vote on election day without having registered ahead of time. We just want to make the process really smooth for students, and the best way to do that is to have students register ahead of time.
Yeah. And why do you think it's so important for students and just people in general to vote?
Well, I think you've heard me say this before, but I'll repeat myself. So in a democracy where we currently live, the way we make any changes, the way we regulate ourselves, the way we govern ourselves is by having a voice in who is making the laws and how the laws are made, who's executing the laws, and that process is voting. And for those people with a much longer future than I have on this planet, I think it's really incredibly important not to throw away your chance to make your voice heard in those decision-making, in that decision-making process. Why would you give up the option, give up your right to have a role in determining your future? Again, your future is a lot longer than mine. But I feel it's incredibly important in this day and age that everyone make their voice heard, and voting is the way to do that. So, and young people in particular, I think, have a lot more on the line, so they have more reason to vote.
Yeah. And then have you seen a lot of enthusiasm in young voters?
Yes, and it's been really gratifying. I've been doing this work for a number of years, and we've been at Mason campus for several years. But this year, the response has been gratifyingly enthusiastic, and I think that that may reflect that my long-held wish that students be more motivated to take part in selecting those who govern them is actually coming true, and that students do recognize what the stakes are in this election, and they are going to make let's face it, a relatively small effort to vote. I mean, unfortunately, it's always harder for students to vote than it would be for people who've been settled at one address and been voting for their entire lives. But it's still kind of a small lift, to just get registered and then do a little research, decide who reflects your values best, and then go and vote, particularly for the students who live on Mason campus when your voting site is actually right there on campus at Merton Hall.
Could you tell me a little bit about how the League of Women Voters started and how their goal has changed over the years?
Well, the League of Women Voters is called that not because we're just women, or as some high school students have asked, well, who's for men voters? It's like, we're for all voters. But we started in 1920, our national organization, and we started just as the women's fight for the right to vote was finally reaching fruition with the passage of the 19th Amendment. So we started right at that point, deciding that if we were now going to take half of the adult population of the United States, or at least theoretically half, and give them this very powerful new right, the right to vote, that they deserved a little bit of support and education about it because women had never voted before, at least not nationwide. So we began as an organization dedicated to continuing that fight for voting rights because that was what our history was, but then also for voter education. So currently, the motto for the League of Women Voters is to defend democracy and to empower voters. And we do that by education, we do that by explanation, and we do also do some advocacy work. But our greatest emphasis is on ensuring that people understand why voting is important, making the process as clear to them as possible, and facilitating them accessing the right to vote by helping them to register. So that's how we started. And frankly, our mission hasn't changed all that much, other than we've grown a little bit more wide in our outreach. We have had a much wider appreciation for those populations that do not have ready access to the vote or who have been discriminated against in the past and at present. And so we are constantly looking to shore up and defend voting rights. I'm very proud to say, the League of Women Voters filed a lawsuit against the state of Virginia just last month when the governor's office decided that they would just automatically purge some 6,000 people off the voter rolls because of questions of citizenship status, rather than ascertaining whether or not people were citizens. This was a violation, we believe, of the law at the time, and we participated in a lawsuit to protest against that. There are other populations that still don't have full voting rights, and we want to make sure that the right of franchise, the right of voting, is expanded to as many people as possible. So I don't feel that our mission has changed that much. We've just been much more aware of how wide the need can be, and we do try to approach and make our assistance available to as large a part of the population as possible.
Yeah. And then my final question for this interview is, what will you be doing? You talked about it a little bit, but what will you be doing on Election Day?
I will be a poll election observer to ensure that that everyone is able to access their right to vote without undue obstruction or any undue questions that would keep them from being able to vote. I don't know if you saw, it was an article in the paper yesterday about a woman who was asked when she went to go and vote if she was a citizen. She was a registered voter, and that is not a part of the process of asking someone, of allowing someone to vote. That is determined ahead of time when they register. And there was no reason to question her citizenship. Those kinds of actions can intimidate or impede people's right to vote, and we want to make sure that that isn't happening.